Hi everyone, welcome to the final session of our webinar series, Making the Most of Your Nonprofit Board. Today's session is all about involving your board in fundraising. My name is Jenny Taylor and I'm the Community Manager here at GuideStar. A few housekeeping items before we begin. First, we're going to be live tweeting during today's presentation using the hashtag OAIBestBoards, so please join the conversation on Twitter. Secondly, we are happy to take questions from you all during the presentation. While the Q&A session will be at the end of the presentation, you are more than welcome to submit questions at any time. To submit a question, you can use the Q&A box on the bottom right-hand corner of your screen. If we can't get to all of your questions before our time is up today, we'll post more of the answers on the GuideStar blog at trust.guidestar.org soon. And finally, we will send all of you an email with a link to the presentation and today's recording in a few days. I'm now happy to introduce Juliana Sloper and Kelly Dunphy. Juliana is a Senior Director at Orr Associates, and Kelly is the Vice President of Fundraising and Development at Orr Associates. Welcome, Juliana and Kelly. We're super excited to have you with us. Kelly, the floor is all yours.
Thank you, Jenny, and welcome everybody to our third and final session on board development. And today we're going to focus in on involving your board in fundraising. And so probably one of the most common questions that comes up from new board members is, do I have to fundraise? And rightly so. Board members really must be expected to help fundraise, and they should know this up front when they first get started on the board. Most people don't join nonprofits boards to raise money. Rather, they join them to make an impact in the community. But to do that, board members need to assume responsibility not only for the strategic vision and impact of the organization, but also to make sure there are adequate resources to run the organization. And from the staff perspective, development staff and the executive director are the ones who can empower or enable board members to fundraise. And when you think about it, effective enablers, they clarify roles and relationships, they help overcome any barriers, they communicate, they provide direction and training, and they coach and mentor people to succeed. And so by enabling board members, you'll help them do this work. And today we're going to talk about some proven tactics and strategies to help you do just that. So our agenda, we'll do some quick introductions. We'll do a quick recap of session 2, and then we'll spend some time on the 3 philanthropic responsibilities of board members, talk through some of the common challenges faced by the board when it comes to fundraising, and we'll make sure to leave plenty of time for Q&A and then do a quick wrap-up. So just quick background on myself. For those of you who have attended all 3, I'm sure you're sick of hearing this now, but I'm Vice President with OAI. I've been with the company for 8 years, but in the world of fundraising for 15 years. As you can see from my background there, I have all kinds of experience with board development and fundraising, capital campaigns, events, major gifts, et cetera. And right now, as part of my role at OAI, I do work closely with a number of organizations, and one of them is I'm serving as the Interim Chief Development Officer for Boys and Girls Harbor in New York City. And before I joined OAI, I worked at Share Our Strengths, the nonprofit that's working to end childhood hunger in America. Did a variety of things there with fundraising. So I'm going to ask Juliana to do a quick overview of her background.
Great. Hi, everybody. Thanks for joining us today. We're thrilled to be here. And as Jenny had mentioned, I am a Senior Director at OAI. I've been with the company for about 7.5 years, but really have focused a total years of fundraising for about 13. I work on a lot of different clients, but specifically I have a lot of expertise in event fundraising and production management for a lot of our event clients, as well as other development management, corporate and individual prospect strategy, and overall relationship building. Previously, I worked at the National Park Foundation, where I was the manager of board relations and special events. And we did a lot of really wonderful work around the national park system and helping raise money for the national parks.
Great, thank you. Okay, so let's move to a recap of last week's session. So last week we reviewed 7 steps to effectively keep your board engaged and productive from the day they join the board through orientation to throughout the length of their terms. And the one in red, we're going to hone in on that one today, involving them in fundraising. But also let's take a moment and think back to session 1 for those of you who are able to join us there, where we focus on board recruitment. And I want to start here because this has such an impact on fundraising. Getting board recruitment right is how to get board engagement and fundraising right. If you haven't screened and recruited board members with a job description that includes clear responsibilities and expectations for not only their giving, but also their fundraising activities, then you're probably bound to have a problem with getting board members to be engaged in fundraising. So just another plug for how important, getting board recruitment right is to help with fundraising as well. Okay, so let's move on to involving your board in fundraising. There are really 3 areas that fall under a board member's philanthropic responsibility. One is to give generously at whatever level is personally significant to them. Number 2, be an advocate. And then number 3, participate in fundraising through 3 primary activities: identification of prospects, cultivating, soliciting, and then stewarding those relationships. So let's focus first on giving generously. And 2 things here. We recommend having an annual meeting with each board member to make a personal solicitation and to set their fundraising goals for the year. In our first session, we talked about how to set those giving and fundraising expectations for the board as a whole. And whether you have a set amount for each for the board members, or you work through that with each board member based on their personal situations. Either way, that kind of individual meeting, usually in the beginning of the fiscal year, to make the ask and to confirm their participation will help get the expectations out there, and everybody's very clear about those expectations. And then secondly, as part of that meeting, consider using an annual commitment form that not only covers their giving and what they're going to be giving through this year, whether it's a straight-out annual donation or buying a table to your annual gala, whatever that might be, but also then how they plan to participate in fundraising, so helping raise money from others. The next slide is just a very basic template that you could customize for your organization for this annual commitment form. So you can see we cover here those 3 areas of philanthropic responsibility, from their personal contribution, so you'll have this in writing, their exact amount, and what we mean by that section of "I will pay this." That's a way for you to get very clear on when they plan to make their donation by, what date, and then in what structure. Are they going to be making one gift and pay it off in one lump sum, or will they split it up between 2 payments? So it's good to get clear about that. And then under advocacy, this is just getting in writing their commitment to speak about the organization and to help spread the word and how they might do that. And then under fundraising activity, if you can, getting a commitment from them with a specific dollar amount of how much they're going to work towards raising for the year, and then how they plan to participate in doing that. And so these are very broad categories right now, and as we'll get into all of these further in the presentation, you'll see what are some of the specific activities around each of those that you can ask people to take part in. And then have them sign it. And this is then you have something in writing, at the end of the fiscal year, or the beginning of the next fiscal year, where you want to report back on how they did, and as a way to hold them accountable to what they committed to, so you can help measure them against what they committed to. And then a few more comments on the annual meeting. As you begin to think about setting up these meetings, as I mentioned, we recommend having them completed with each board member within the first 2 months of the fiscal year, So those goals can be set, and then outcomes of these meetings can become a part of the day-to-day operation of your organization. So you can understand, okay, we expect, these gifts to come in on these dates. We know that these board members are committed to hosting a cultivation event, so you can begin to plot out that calendar of cultivation events, et cetera. And these meetings are really a great opportunity to have one-on-one time with your board members. And it's an opportunity to focus on the larger picture of their contribution to your organization. I know we're really focused on giving and fundraising here, but it's also a time to talk with them about how they're feeling about the direction of the organization, their involvement on the programmatic side of things. Have they done a site visit recently? Are they invested in strategic planning or getting that off the ground? So I open it up to a larger conversation for this, one-on-one meeting. And so it's a good time to reflect on the past year as well. How that went, how many meetings they attended, are they fulfilling those responsibilities, what committees were they on, how did they feel that committee performed for the year, and then to also look forward. So what are their plans for the year, both giving and fundraising, and committee involvement and things of that nature. Equipping each board member with several tools to help them achieve their fundraising commitment is so critical. First, getting the commitment to participate in fundraising is step number one, but then to help them achieve success, we as staff need to provide them with the tools to do that. So there's a few things that we've listed here. One would be an annual training for your board on fundraising approaches and tactics. And you could do this in a couple different ways. It could be a standing part of your annual orientation meeting for new board members, or you could choose to do it at one of your board meetings each year. And think about how you switch it up each year, maybe focus on corporate one year or individuals another year, just so it's not the same old training year after year, and it's an opportunity to continue to expand and deepen their knowledge about fundraising. Then secondly, providing opportunities for a board member to engage in fundraising. So if you have an annual gala, are they going to commit to selling 5 tables to that? Or will they host a cultivation event in their home or attend a number of cultivation events for the organization? Secure a matching gift from their company. Whatever that is, providing them with those ideas and opportunities to help them, think about their goal. Let's say, for example, they've set a goal of $25,000 that they want to help raise this year in addition to what they're giving personally. Breaking down how they might do that through a variety of activities will help them see that this is actually achievable, and there's a clear plan on how they're going to get there with our help. And then, of course, support from the staff and the development committee chair, if applicable, as a resource for questions, motivation, accountability. It's important to make sure your staff has enough time to support the board in their fundraising efforts. And then, of course, quarterly or even monthly updates from the staff on each board member's progress towards achieving his or her commitment. So this could be personal one-on-one outreach between the chief development officer and the board member, checking in on how things are going, if any of the prospects they've identified, progress is being made with those in terms of cultivation, or somebody was asked to make a gift or, buy a table to your event, make sure that board member knows that their person came through with a gift. So those kind of continual updates and communication are important and keeps fundraising top of mind for them. All right, I'm going to turn it over to Juliana now to talk about our second area.
Excellent. So before you can encourage the board members to go out and talk to others about the organization, it's really important to make sure that they know what it is that they're talking about. One of the most important tools that you can provide to a board member is the ability to talk about the organization and really talk about their personal connection to the organization itself. it's important to remember that the board and the staff are the strongest, most reliable ambassadors of the organization. And in order for them to actually best represent the mission, they have to have a personal connection or a personal story that they want to share with others. So encourage them, whether it's through these one-on-one meetings or through additional outreach throughout the year, really encourage them to talk from their heart. Tell the prospective donors or the current donors a personal story about why they are involved. Why do they focus their philanthropic giving to this particular organization, and really try to move the dial with new donors on how they can also get involved. That sort of personal touch and personal appeal is really effective, especially for new donors and new prospects when they're trying to jump into the mission and try to really understand what that means. It is important, though, as you're encouraging them to be able to talk about personal stories, that as staff members, you're actually giving them an opportunity to create those moments for themselves. So providing them with evidence and impact of the organization, providing them with stories, and having some real things that they can draw upon when serving as an advocate for the organization. Excuse me. Also making sure that they have direct access to the mission, encouraging them to go on a site visit, perhaps it's volunteering with one of the programs, and during the one-on-one annual meeting that Kelly just talked about, really take some time to talk about what their interests are, figure out a way to involve them in the mission so then they really do understand how that personal connection comes full circle to be able to talk about it. Another really important thing beyond just the personal heartstrings pull is making sure that they have the most up-to-date facts and figures about the organization, and that they can really feel confident about what they're talking about, speaking effectively about the challenges and the successes, and as staff members, really equipping them with those tools and talking points to be able to talk to those facts. These types of tools can include something like a one-pager about the organization. Maybe it's a case statement that's recently been created, an annual report, or some background information about an upcoming event or an initiative that they want to try to get others involved in. Last week, Craig and Kelly talked a little bit about also finding a mission moment at each of the board meetings. This is a great opportunity to really, again, involve the board members with real-time inclusion in the work of the organization. So it could be an opportunity to volunteer, it could be a featured video, or it could be the opportunity to create an elevator pitch that the board member can really sit down and dial in their focus for how they talk about the organization. So this is an activity that will help them and talk them through what their connection is. And perhaps this is an activity that's led by the communications director, or if there is someone on your board that has a specific focus on communications, that could be a great way to involve them as well. So as you are beginning to plan the board involvement from year to year, or as you're planning on onboarding new board members, it may help the staff to take a step back for a minute and think about the involvement from a board member's perspective. As you've gotten them on board, they're set to go, they have all of their tools that are ready to sort of jump off the diving board, but it may seem a little bit overwhelming to them to narrow down how they can actually help. There are all sorts of ways, and I know we've given you a lot of examples, but in order to help the board members focus their involvement at a really top level, think about the following 4 big picture categories that are on this slide. Each board member should be involved, especially at the beginning, in at least one of these 4 steps. And as they progress in their tenure on your board, hopefully you're getting them to 2 of the 4 or 3 of the 4, or eventually they could be involved in all 4 steps. So over the next few slides, we'll talk specifically about identification, cultivation, solicitation, and stewardship. Not all of these categories will fit for each board member, so really identifying which one or ones best suits their interests or their capabilities. This will really help them feel empowered to actually set goals, achieve them, and not feel overwhelmed or frustrated if they have to accomplish something that they may not feel that they could accomplish. So our first step, or our first category, is identification. Identification can take many different forms. In some instances, this would be the board member's commitment to produce a list of prospects from their personal network, which could be introduced to the organization. Introducing new prospects could take the form of an invitation from the board member to a prospect to attend a cultivation event. Maybe it's a solicitation for sponsorship to those prospects for a fundraising event, or it may just be simply opening the door for a conversation and allowing those new prospects the opportunity to learn more about the organization. Secondly, identification can also take the shape of an exercise that's initiated by the organization itself. There could be a list that is produced by the development team with the intention of finding donors that are specifically targeted maybe to an initiative, or maybe there are a list of people that are focused around the board members' network or their personal interests that they may not have thought of directly. So this could be a great opportunity to sit down and brainstorm with your board members and review this list that's been put together by the development team, and really go through and identify any warm or cool leads that are possible to open new doors for the organization. Having the board members identify prospects from their network, or reach out to prospects that the organization has identified, really can only be helped with the staff providing the right tools. So again, as Kelly mentioned, having opportunities that the new donors or the new prospects can actually be involved in will help. Also making sure that board members, as they're preparing to reach out to any of their identified prospects, making sure that they have the tools, maybe they have giving profiles or research talking points, anything that could be used for each of these meetings, again, to really help equip them to talk about the organization and find a real connection for these prospects to be involved. Okay. Our next category is cultivation, and this is really a way for them to become more involved in the mission of the organization. The board members, again, will want opportunities to be able to bring new prospects or bring their networks to the organization and have something to show. So this could be an opportunity to invite prospects to an event. Maybe it is a fundraiser or a cocktail reception that really just targets prospects where they can learn more about the organization and really focus on the mission. But then there could be an invitation to attend an event as a guest of the board members, to sit at the gala table that the board member has purchased and really learn more about other programmatic pieces that are happening at the event or celebrating the successes of the organization. Cultivation also could include the opportunity for the board member to host an event. Perhaps that's inviting guests to their home for a small gathering of potential supporters. And this allows for more one-on-one time, quieter time for new donors or prospective donors to become involved in the organization without being overwhelmed in a 500 to 1,000 person gala, and really have time for staff members and other ambassadors to talk directly with the potential new donors. One important element to remember is that cultivation and identification doesn't always mean just cutting straight to the chase and asking this new prospect for money, but it could really help open the door for a conversation. So contacting people from the board members' network that they really would feel interested in new opportunities, and not just having to say, hi, could you give us the money? So it's really helped fostering the relationships and making everybody comfortable with how they're getting involved and being effective with their involvement. A way that staff can really help with the cultivation process is to help, again, create the opportunities where the board members could bring these new prospects, and also helping them with the correspondence, helping to track any moves management that would happen with any of the outreach and communications, and really helping foster the relationship between the board member and the prospect to help the relationships grow stronger in time. So really having the staff make it as easy as possible for board members to reach out to their networks and feel prepared to talk to new donors.
Great. Okay, so then moving on to solicitation. I think as a lot of us know who have been in this fundraising business for a while, the moment to get to solicitation is when you've done the cultivation piece of it correctly and all the things that Juliana just described. So on this section, I actually want to start with the staff's role first, because the staff's role here, I think, again, is to help set board members up for success. And so some of the tools that you can provide would be, and we mentioned this earlier, conduct a training for the board. So an art of the ask or making the ask training at a board meeting. And there are some good resources out there online that I've found, and also we've developed some great things on the sort of step-by-step process of how to make the ask. Then helping them prep for this ask meeting. So that's providing prospect research, a summary of the donor relationship to date, what's the strategy for the meeting and the talking points, and doing a prep call with anybody involved in the solicitation, so you can get real clear on who plays which role in the meeting, what the desired outcomes are, et cetera. And then, of course, attending the meeting, the solicitation meeting with a board member. And I recommend this regardless of whether a board member is confident in making the ask or not. Staff can often answer more detailed questions about programs or operations. Oftentimes, fundraising staff are more trained to handle certain objections, et cetera. And you also get a second take on the meeting tone, the outcomes, and as a staff person, you know, your job is to get very clear on what those next steps are and make sure those next steps happen. So that's how the staff can support, a few ways the staff can support board members in actually making an ask. And so once a board member is trained and they're supported and hopefully they're feeling a bit more confident about how to be involved in a solicitation, there's a couple things that you might ask them to do. One in particular, and of course this all comes down to what is the right approach for each donor. In the cases where it makes sense for a board member to join the executive director or the development officer in a solicitation meeting, oftentimes it's usually because that board member has a relationship with the prospect, and whether it's because they knew that prospect, you know, before and they brought them to the table, or perhaps they've been involved in the cultivation of the prospect and have started to develop a relationship with them, so it makes sense to have the board member be involved in the actual solicitation. And then something that I've found to work really well, even with board members who maybe have more experience in solicitation meetings, they still might feel more comfortable in the role of making the case or telling the story. You know, this is why this is such a great organization. Here's everything we're accomplishing, and playing that role. And then the staff member can make the ask. You know, get the number out there. It's that number that's such a stumbling block for people in making solicitations and goes right to the heart of why people fear asking for money. So if you can help the board member be successful in their role by making the case, that should work really well. And then the staff member is then responsible for making sure the actual ask is made. Okay, and then everything goes swimmingly and the ask was made as it should have been and you get a yes. You move into the stewardship phase. And this is actually an ideal stage to get someone new to or uncomfortable with fundraising involved with fundraising. And I would say for anybody that falls in that category, this is the right place to start with them. So ways that a board member can get involved: making thank you calls or writing personal notes to donors, those that they know, but also those they don't know. I think this special step, in addition to a standard gift receipt thank you letter that all of our donors receive, it can really go a long way to making a donor feel appreciated and recognized, to be hearing from a member of the board of the organization. And it's, I would say 99% of the time, it's a great experience. There's probably some odd outliers out there, but making a thank you call, I think the board member feels comfortable in that donor conversation, and makes them feel good about the donors that are supporting the organization. So again, it's a great first step. They could also, if you're doing an event, like Juliana mentioned, a fundraiser, ask board members to help make a couple follow-up calls to make sure someone got an invitation and that board member really hopes to see them there. That's another way they could participate. And the staff role, in terms of supporting the board with stewardship, providing, if they are going to do thank you calls or thank you notes, providing board members with talking points or template note language that they can then customize. So wanting to make it easy for them to just get going and follow through. And then providing updates when a board member's prospect makes a gift. This can be just a real quick email saying, so-and-so's commitment just came in, they bought a table, just want to let you know in case you'd like to also do a quick thank you call to them. And then keeping the board up to date on opportunities for stewarding donors. So anytime you have an opportunity for a site visit or a special event, it doesn't have to be a big event, but something smaller, just so that board members are continually aware of your schedule of activities and what's going on at the organization, so they can be thinking with you about opportunities for stewarding donors, or hey, my friend that just donated last year, I think they'd really like to attend this event and hear more about the organization, that kind of thing. So making sure they have all that information. So we just went through the 4 stages. It's really the sort of the cycle of fundraising, from identifying prospects to putting together cultivation plans for each of them, and then getting to the right point to make the right ask, and then following it up by stewarding them and thanking them properly. So as you can see, I hope you can see that there are some clear ways that board members can be engaged in each of those steps. And probably with stewardship and identification being the easiest ones to start with. And then I think as they get more comfortable, they can easily start getting more involved in cultivation and eventually solicitation as well. So let's focus on then accountability. We talked about the annual commitment forms as a way to get in writing what board members are committed to around fundraising. It's a great way to help keep them accountable. But I did want to also spend a little bit of time talking about the development committee. And because this role of holding board members accountable could also lie with your development committee. Because one of the committee's responsibilities should be to ensure that 100% of the board is giving as well as fundraising. And then the staff should provide the committee with regular updates on the status of board giving and fundraising. And the committee is also a great way to bring on non-board members to the work of fundraising and developing resources for the organization. So perhaps you have a big annual event and that event has a chair who's not one of your board members, but perhaps has been the chair for a couple of years and is invested in your organization in this way. It might make sense in that case to invite that person to also join the development committee. So people who have who are willing to focus on fund development but not necessarily able to make a full commitment to the governing board. So I just wanted to include that side note that a development committee is a great way to bring on non-board members to build your ranks of those who are helping with fundraising. And the committee is not necessarily responsible for raising all the money, but again, they are responsible for approving the development plan and making sure that the board is engaged in doing some of this work. And then the last note here is considering a board giving campaign with some clear goals, expectations, and a time frame. And this could be a project of the development committee. And I've seen this work really well with a few different organizations. In one case, this organization is a federally qualified health center, and by the statutes involved in that status, 51% of their board needs to be made up of the community that they serve. So in this case, patients whom they serve. And so there was a real difference between the types of people on the board and their individual capacities for giving. And so the committee set a goal to achieve 100% giving. They don't have a give-get for some of the reasons I just stated, but be able to report back to funders that require you to have 100% giving. They undertook this campaign, and they explained what we're trying to achieve, why we're trying to do it, why it's important, and that the expectation is that everybody makes a gift that's personally significant to them. And in this case, there were people giving $10,000 and people giving all the way down to $25 or $50. And over the course of 3 months, we were able to have everybody make a gift. So we reached 100% participation. And the key thing there was that the board then really celebrated the success of reaching that accomplishment. They felt really good about it. With another organization that I'm working with right now, they've also undertaken a board campaign, and they set a goal for, they had 100% giving, but based on their research, they felt like some of their board members could be giving at a greater capacity. So they set a goal to increase board giving by a certain amount by having one-on-one conversations with each board member, but at the same time, they also wanted to start seeing 100% involvement in fundraising. So they set a goal to have each member identify 3 to 5 potential prospects and bring those to the table. And that's going really well so far. They're in the midst of it. People have been more open than they have in the past to sharing names because I think they've gotten motivated and excited about this campaign. They're celebrating early wins. They're recognizing board members who are following through and coming to the table with names and with their gifts. So that's a great way to inject some energy and momentum around board giving and fundraising. Okay. So in the next section, we wanted to go through some of the common challenges I think a lot of us have seen when working with boards and fundraising. So the first one, the ask takes the least amount of time, and when you think about the whole cycle of fundraising from identification through to stewardship, that ask portion requires the least amount of time, but it holds the biggest fear, I think, for a lot of board members. So we're going to focus on the fear of hearing no on the next slide. Juliana will cover that. But for board members who state outright, I can't or won't ask for money, instead ask them to help with identification, cultivation, or stewardship. Start to develop that comfort level with the other phases of fundraising. And asking them to host or attend a cultivation event, we've talked about that. Accompany a staff member in a cultivation visit, and then hopefully eventually they'll get comfortable accompanying a staff member on an ask visit. So one other thing I would say is, and I've done this with a number of board members, and I think it's really worked, is to provide an opportunity for board members to share their hesitations, concerns, fears, complaints about fundraising. I'd recommend doing it one-on-one with any board members who are showing hesitation or outright refusal to fundraise. It gives it an opportunity to just get it out on the table so you can understand where their objections come from and then figure out how to handle them, how to overcome them. You can tailor your training, your support, your tools to help them work through those concerns. Because that's really the best way to get through any challenge, is to get real honest about what's at the heart of the issue and work through them together. And then another, I think, common challenge that we see is what I'm calling the quid pro quo factor, where board members are, don't want to ask their friends for money because they know, 3 months down the line, they're going to get the same ask back from their friends. It's almost like they're just trading money for each other's organizations. And so what I would say in those cases is, yes, I think that's a valid factor when you're doing more transactional, event-based fundraising, where, you're calling up your 10 friends to buy tables. But what I would say instead, where you're trying to develop relationships, is to start with a conversation and not an ask. So you're not saying, my organization's doing this event, will you buy a table for $10,000? Instead, you're saying, I think, I'm on the board of this organization. They're doing some really great work. I think you might be interested in learning more about it. Can we set up some time to talk? And the executive director could come with the board member in that conversation. Not everybody will say yes to that, but it's a lot easier to say yes to that than the first conversation being an ask for money. There's one organization I worked with a couple of years ago in particular. The majority of their fundraising outside of institutional giving through, from foundations and corporations, they'd been really doing transactional fundraising with individuals. So the majority of their individual fundraising was driven through their annual gala. And they had set a goal to build a major donor pipeline outside of the gala. And you don't do that by making an ask right out of the gate because somebody is your friend or colleague. You have to develop the relationship. So you start with a conversation. And what we did is we trained and we prepared board members with talking points for how to approach just a few people at first in their networks about learning more about the organization. So we worked with the development committee of 8 people. We asked each of them to identify 3 to 5 people they'd be willing to reach out to just to start a conversation. Everybody got very comfortable with that approach, and we teed up emails for them. And this is where the staff involvement comes in, that you're making this as turnkey and easy as possible. And they sent out those emails. And like I said, not everybody said yes, but most people said yes, or, I don't, my plate's really full right now, but let's talk again about this in 6 months or a year. Or, I do really know about this organization. They are doing great work. I can't get involved, but I'll send in a contribution right now. So there's a lot of great kinds of responses, a variety of responses, but this approach, I've seen it work time and again to get the board more comfortable in fundraising and also to move from a transactional fundraising approach to more of a relationship-based approach. Okay, I'm going to ask Juliana to cover the next couple.
Great. So as Kelly alluded to many times, when board members are tasked with reaching out to their prospects, there is the possibility of hearing no. And this is, I think, as Kelly and I have talked about and have experienced, this is also one of the big fears that the board members may push back for fear of hearing no. Whether it's no, we're not interested, we won't financially support your event, or no, we just don't have time. Nobody really likes hearing the word no, but in development work, many times we hear no. Instead of putting a negative spin on the possibility of no, we really encourage you to sit down with your board members and think of it as the beginning to a conversation. Really assessing relationships and determining how to best approach prospects. And as we have talked about already, really finding the right time to ask if it's a financial ask, designating what that right time is for more of a possibility to say yes. Properly prepping board members, coaching them to set realistic expectations for the conversation so they don't end up being frustrated is another way that you can really help them prevent the frustration around hearing no or the possibility of hearing no. And really changing conversations to allow for a focus on follow-up questions, starting a new conversation. If the answer ends in no, how could we provide you Mr. or Mrs. new donor prospect with more information about the organization? How can we open up your eyes to more opportunities to really get involved with the organization? So it's really also using that cultivation step as the fostering tool and showing the impact of the organization and changing the eventual answer to a yes. I'll give you an example of a board member. It was an advisory board member for an organization that I've been working with for several years. The idea around no came in the form that this advisory board member had been approached to be honored for the organization's annual gala. And right away, they said no, they weren't interested. They didn't really understand what the involvement would be and didn't really understand the fundraising approach. So instead of being frustrated at getting that no and not having an honoree for that year, instead we changed the conversation to really involve them more in the programmatic work of the organization. Invited him to attend a site visit, really seeing the mission of the organization in action, and inviting him to the event that year where we did end up having another honoree, so he could really understand a little bit more about what happens at the event, what sort of successes had been celebrated. And now, after 3 years, that cultivation process did take 3 years. So you know that it doesn't always turn out right away, that the answer turns from no to yes. But after several years of involving this particular gentleman in a lot more programmatic work, he has actually accepted the challenge of being this year's honoree for the event and has committed to raising $1 million for the organization. So the cultivation tool and the involvement tool in the programmatic work has really worked successfully for this particular organization, and he now understands the mission. He feels moved by the work of the organization and is really willing to reach out to his network.
So Juliana, just jumping in for a second, I think that's a great example of knowing the right time. Well, maybe in this case, the first time out, it wasn't the right time to make the ask, and then over the course of those 3 years, through various cultivation activities, it led to the right time to make the right ask for the right purpose. So I can't say enough about that top bullet point under the fear of hearing no, that you diminish your chances of hearing no if you've done all the proper cultivation work. And when you go into that ask meeting, the donor should really know why you're there and is prepared to, if not make a decision there, certainly be open to it and, take the information and get back to you within a clear time frame on their decision.
Another common challenge that we've seen is a lack of follow-through. Maybe the board member in your initial meeting, they are willing to reach out or make introductions, and then the momentum falls flat and the initial conversations go by the wayside. So this could leave the board member feeling frustrated, or they may want to stop with any asks for future movement forward. But a way to really help counteract that is during the identification process that you are working with your board members on, focus on the easy wins. Kelly alluded to this in her example of the client that she's working with. Don't let them get overwhelmed by their entire contact list. Really help narrow down 2 or 3 strong prospects that the board member feels would have the most interest or the most potential to become involved with the organization. And again, it's that key staffing where the staff members should ensure that the board members have the tools that they need to use to reach out, creating talking points or presentations for them, and then sending the board members digestible information about the organization so they can really cut to the chase easily with these easy wins and really help progress forward.
Okay, and then one last one. When you're at a moment for culture change, the board as a whole doesn't get or want its role in fund development. Perhaps they think it's the staff's job to wrestle with that. And we all know that that's not true, that the most successful Resource development operations are ones where the board, the executive director, and the chief development officer, development director are acting in a true partnership. But this kind of culture change, it doesn't happen quickly. It may take 2 to 3 years, sometimes more. And the way culture change happens is through behavior change. And behavior change comes from new practices and early wins. So a few comments on some of the steps to take in moving towards culture change. First, with the board leadership, your chair. He or she must be in favor and committed to leading the effort. The board really looks to the chair as their leader. So if your chair is part of the problem, I think there needs to be a real education process employed. Ask your board chair to join you at a session provided by your local AFP chapter, or if you have a foundation center in your area, whatever the entity might be that offers nonprofit training. There are often sessions around board roles and responsibilities. Ask them to join you for one of those. There's also there's great books out there, real short reads about the board's role in general, but also with fundraising. So providing those opportunities to help educate the board on the board's entire role as a governing board member, not just around financials and fiduciary responsibility, et cetera, but also that fundraising piece. And then look to your development committee. Do you have the right chair in place of the development committee? Are they also in favor of this culture change of moving the board to one of a culture of philanthropy? Do you have the right membership on the committee? Again, they must be totally on board with those changes. And the development committee then can be the first almost sort of pilot or testing ground for implementing some of the best practices that we've reviewed today for how to engage members in fundraising. Seek out early wins. So you're not, like I said, it is going to take some time. You're not going to change everything overnight. You're not going to, raise $1 million more in 2 months. But find those early wins, and perhaps it's the committee takes on a priority list of 10 prospects, and you're going to work with them on specific cultivation plans. Perhaps it's that the committee comes up with that list of 10 new people. It's those baby steps, but celebrating those early wins and communicating them. So celebrating those milestones, it'll help people see the momentum that this can actually work. And then it's just it takes the focus and the commitment and patience to see it through. And then at the same time that you're working with your current board members on these changes, don't forget about board recruitment, because you should also be changing or improving your screening and recruiting process to make sure your job description has the clear expectation around giving and getting, and that you're recruiting members to commit to that from day one. And again, not going to happen overnight, but it will pay off with focus and commitment and patience. Okay, so I know we have a few minutes left for Q&A. So Jenny, do you want to get us started there?
Absolutely. We've got some great questions coming in. A couple of people have asked similar questions, so I'm going to start with the questions that we've had more than once. The main question is, who is responsible for sitting down with board members for their annual giving commitment meetings? Is it the executive director, board chairman, or another person on staff?
So I recommend that it's really the responsibility of the executive director. They should be devoting, 20 to 30% of their time anyway around all things board management and engagement. They'll make sure it gets done. So definitely the executive director. And then in particular cases with some board members, it may make sense to bring the board chair along, or the nominating committee chair, whatever that right combination is. But ultimately, at the end of the day, it's the responsibility of the executive director. Great.
And is there a standard for the percentage of your annual budget that your board contributes, of the organization, I'm guessing? This person has heard that it should be 10%, but hasn't been able to confirm that percentage.
Yeah, it's a good question. So there's not really a set standard, because it often will depend on the size of your organization and the overall revenue makeup. What are all the various sources? What source is government and public funding? Is there any earned income, and how philanthropy relates to all that? So all that said, I would say, again, this is heavily caveated, but 20, 25% from board giving. But again, I say that's not a hard and fast answer. You have to look at a number of variables.
Great. And you mentioned the elevator speech a couple of times, and some people aren't familiar with that so much. Do you mind giving an example of one or going a little bit more into that?
I can certainly go into what are the kinds of things to include in an elevator speech, and Juliana, jump in with any of your ideas too. But essentially, we can all put ourselves mentally in that situation where you're at a cocktail party or on the proverbial elevator, and you have 20, maybe 30 seconds to get the message out. So you want to make sure your mission. What are you? Why do you exist? What are you there for? And then add in some impact. So both touching the head and the heart. So hopefully the mission will help get to that heart factor, why you're all here, and what you're hoping to accomplish, but then bringing in some results of, obviously what we're doing is working, or how your organization is unique. What differentiates you from maybe other organizations doing similar kind of work. So those are the kinds of things you could say. If you have time to work in, a recent accolade, or the mayor just highlighted you as the top education organization, whatever it might be, if you can work that in too. But, put yourself in the shoes of somebody who's hearing about the organization for the first time. They have no context whatsoever. And so to be very focused, and don't necessarily, I often counsel this, you don't have to feel like you need to memorize the mission statement word for word. Sometimes mission statements are more about what the organization feels like they need to communicate. And just keep it focused really on more of, the vernacular of how you would talk to somebody, and making sure those key points are in there.
The only thing that I'll add on top of that is to put yourself in the situation knowing that you have about 20 to 25 seconds to get across this targeted message that Kelly was talking about. So as you're encouraging board members to create an elevator speech, or even your staff to create an elevator speech, it's really prioritizing the top few things that need to be said, something to grab their interest to where they would want to learn more. So pitching the elevator speech is the door opener, and then later going through all of the financials and the real details is the opportunity when you sit down for a meeting, or you have that cultivation opportunity further down the road.
Excellent. Thank you so much. I'm so sorry that the top of the hour snuck up on us. Do you guys have any final words for people on the phone?
Sure. Yeah, I just want to thank everyone for attending today, and to those who are able to join us for all three. I hope we've given you some helpful but very actionable recommendations and best practices that you can put to work right away at your organization to recruit and engage and support an effective board. It is hard work that will take time, focus, and commitment, but I promise you, if you do stay focused, it will pay off in so many ways for your organizations and for what you're trying to accomplish to make the world a better place. But I know we didn't have as much time for questions today as we had hoped, but Juliana's and my contact information is here in the PowerPoint, and I know everything's going to be sent out afterwards too.
Absolutely, yes. And as a reminder, we will also be sending questions to Juliana and Kelly and Craig and Caitlin, and we will post some of these answers that they give us on our blog, trust.guidestar.org, on April 1st. And also keep an eye out for an email with the presentation and the recording links. And we will post all three of these on our website, guidestar.org/webinars, in the next week or so. In closing, thank you so much to Juliana and Kelly for being here today, and Kelly for leading this wonderful webinar series the last 3 weeks. We really appreciate it. And to everyone on the phone, thank you for being here today. Our next webinar will be Demystifying the Form 990 on Tax Day, April 15th. Go to guidestar.org/webinars to sign up. Thank you all so much and have a wonderful day.